Hey, gang. Hello, hello, hello. Right, let's just share this on Teams. Slightly new setup today and hope that it works. So I will move you slightly closer. Oh, not that close. In the hope that this works a little bit better. Smooth. Okay. So the answer was no, it didn't work any better. But it might if it goes there. We'll try that. We'll try that. Right. Now, 4 of you have managed to see me wreck my room, which is excellent. Hope you're all well and that you've been able to enjoy the sunshine over half term because it's been absolutely beautiful. I must say I have very much enjoyed the sunshine, got myself a little bit burnt, standard Miss Smart behaviour. We are going to go on to Jack the Ripper today. So today I'm going to look at, like, in the usual format of I'll go over the main kind of aspects on this sheet here, and then it's a case of creating a mind map, looking at the clips, and then answering the questions for me. This is the last one of its kind. So you're probably thinking, well, Miss, what are we doing on Thursday? Well, Thursday I'm setting you a documentary on Jack the Ripper from Amelia Fox with the BBC. It's absolutely fantastic. It's one of the best Jack the Ripper documentaries I've ever watched. It goes into a lot of detail. It's pretty fantastic. So that's what you're going to be doing on Thursday. So without further ado, let's move you back slightly and let's get teaching. She says in her new Shauna Phillips joggers. Just done a workout, so I'm a little bit warm. Oh, you can't read that. I'll zoom in a minute. It's not a problem. Right, so Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was the most famous killer in British history, I would say, because he was never caught. So spoiler alert, if you don't know much about Jack the Ripper, he was never caught. So that adds to a lot of mystery, around him. And there's a kind of like almost like a following of trying to discover who he could have been, that sort of thing. Now, he's known as Jack the Ripper because he, from what he did to his victims, the ripping is what he did to his victims. So they would be cut kind of from their belly button, from their chest bone, kind of here-ish. Yeah, roughly here-ish, their chest bone, right down to their belly button down here, and then be opened up. So it was the action of what he did. He is known to have killed 5 women. That is not to say that he didn't kill any more, because we cannot say that for certain. There is evidence, as you will see in your documentary, that there is a 6th for definite Jack the Ripper victim, but these were just the 5 that the Whitechapel police linked to Jack the Ripper initially. But like I said, there is nothing to say that it wasn't more. Right, let's start then with our first victim. I'm very aware you can't see that, but I'll pull you closer, don't worry. So the first known victim that we say is part of Jack the Ripper was on the 31st of August 1888, and her name was Mary, but she went by the name Polly Nichols. Let's hope if you can spell, Miss Martin. You can tell I've not written very much over the last week or so. Let's pull you in a little bit. Oh, this live is excellent quality. Is that better? Maybe not. I'll pull you in at the end. Wow, this is great content. So Mary or Polly Nichols, she was killed on the 31st of August in a place called Bucks Row. Okay, Bucks Row. Now Bucks Row is in the heart of Whitechapel, just like the rest of them. She had her throat and her abdomen, so her belly, cut. So that sensation of the ripping from the chest bone to the belly button, along with her throat. So it was quite clear from Polly's injuries that she had been attacked from behind, because when you go to slit someone's throat, you do need that standing behind them so you can get that good cut. So that was this police said that was done to silence her for her screams. And she was a prostitute, Annie Chapman, Polly Nichols even. She was a prostitute and she was the first known victim. The second murder, was on the 8th of September. 3 days after Miss Martin's birthday. This was Annie Chapman. Now, Annie Chapman's, it's her. Annie Chapman's murder is quite interesting in that she was murdered in Hanbury Street. She was strangled, her throat had been cut, her intestines were outside of her body, so she had also been ripped down the middle. But she was in like an alleyway in like a courtyard, and her body was pressed up against a wall. So it's clear that she kind of put up a fight. She'd been pushed up against this wall, and it was obvious that really she was trying to meet a client. Jack the Ripper then goes quiet for 22 days. So there's these are in pretty quick succession. They're obviously within about 9 days of each other. Jack the Ripper then goes quiet for 3 weeks. Whether it was the fear of him being caught, whether it was the fact that he couldn't find a victim, I don't know. But he does go quiet. But when he comes back for his next murder, it is done with an absolute bang. And number 3 and 4 of his victims are killed on the same night. Please don't bark. Please don't bark. Okay, now on the 30th of September, this was known as the double event. Okay, so Jack the Ripper has gone to kill Elizabeth Stride, Long Liz, which she was known as because she was quite tall for a lady. So Long Liz has taken him as a client, and he has cut her throat in Dutfield's yard. He has begun to make the incision in terms of don't bark, Fletcher, Lenny. Fletcher. Both of my dogs are down here. Fletcher. He doesn't like lawnmowers when someone's mowing the lawn outside. So Elizabeth Long Liz had her throat cut, and you could see that the incision had been started from her chest to her belly button, but he was interrupted by he was interrupted during this murder and had to leave Elizabeth Stride's body where he'd started to kill her. That then meant he hadn't got his, I don't know whether it was his fix, that I'm not entirely sure, I'm not a psychologist, but that Fletcher, stop it. He hadn't managed to successfully carry out the murder in the way that he had wanted. So he'd not been able to do his signature rip. That meant that Jack the Ripper was now on the hunt for another victim, and that was Catherine Eddowes. So it's roughly about, I think it's about a mile and a half. I could be wrong with that. Mitre Square from Duckfield Yard, or possibly about, like, it's about a mile. He managed to then get from Duckfield Yard, a mile away, to Mitre Square in the City of London police area. So everything else has been in the Met police area so far. And he goes into Mitre Square and he mutilates Catherine Eddowes' face. He takes her ear off, I believe it is. He again does the signature rip down the body. Go on then. Go on, out. I'm so glad I have dogs. Yeah, he does the signature rip down the body. And now it is not only the investigation of the Met Police, it is the investigation of the City Police, because Mitre Square is in city boundaries. The last one that we know of is, so we've got the 30th of September. There is now lots of hype around. Hype's the wrong word. Great, he's howling out there. Fantastic. There's a lot of fear around Jack the Ripper now at this point. There is a lot of hysteria. People are going completely out of their minds with fear. They won't do this, they won't do that. And that then means Jack the Ripper has to lie low for quite some time. He then makes his final murder that we know of on the 9th of November. It's very warm up here, so I have to... Mary Kelly. So on the 9th of November, he murders... Come on, leave along. That should be a bit straighter. It's winding me up. Mary Kelly on the 9th of November. Now, this lady was known to have issues with her husband. And like I said, all of these were prostitutes, these ladies. And Mary Kelly's murder is the worst out of all of them. I'm not saying that they're all like they're good, but Mary Kelly's in particular is pretty horrific, because Jack the Ripper is not doing it out in the open. He is not rushed. He has got time. He's got the venue, and he can literally fulfill his fantasy with Mary Kelly's murder. She is standard throat cut, chest to belly cut, and then around her room are her body parts. They are spread around her bed. She's positioned in a bed a certain way. Her face is almost unrecognisable, and Jack the Ripper just goes to town on Mary Kelly. And it's quite clear that Mary Kelly, as a prostitute, had invited Jack the Ripper into her home to be part of her client, as her client, which is probably her worst mistake, because with these here, particularly Long Liz, they were outside, they were in the open. Jack the Ripper couldn't quite do what he wanted, particularly with Long Liz. So yeah, it's Mary Kelly's is brutal. They do show you it in the documentary, her picture of her face, and she's unrecognisable to the picture that they compare it to. So we've now got 5 horrific murders committed apparently by the same guy, Jack the Ripper, and now we need a police investigation. There we go. I'll stand at the side now. So the police techniques that we've got then for Jack the Ripper is they used autopsies. So all the Ripper victims had autopsies. The police felt that the killer was left-handed. He had skill of the anatomy, so they thought he might be a doctor or a butcher. They had a specially built mortuary in Whitechapel. If you went on the London trip or go on the London trip, which I recommend year 10 in year 11, there is a park where you get to see where Jack the Ripper's victims were brought. So these autopsies are effectively, they do something called a Y cut. So they cut from shoulder to shoulder to the breastbone and then down like that to have a look what injuries they've got that are internal. And they then log all of the injuries that you can see. So each of the Ripper victims had an autopsy. They also used photography. So they would take pictures of the bodies once they'd reached the mortuary for the autopsy or the post-mortem. So they'd have a before and after. It's not quite the transformation picture that you want. Before my autopsy and after my autopsy. And Mary Kelly, because her body was discovered in the day and her body was inside, they were able to photograph the crime scene of Mary Kelly's murder. Whereas the others, because they were in the dark, because they were in the open, and because they were in the dark and the open, I can't think of another reason. They had sketches done because they seemed to be quicker, because photography took a long time. Also, they used to interview a lot of people, so they scoured the police from. Again, this is on the documentary. They pinpoint Polly as the first murder, and they interviewed everyone around that particular area. They did about 2,000 interviews. They searched lodging houses. They searched rookeries. They went into butchers. They questioned prostitutes. You name it, they did it. All to try and catch Jack the Ripper. So let me just bring you to the board so you can see that slightly. Oh, it does help if you don't hold it one key. So that's what we've done so far. There we go, that's long enough for you to pause it if you need it. And now we're going to just move on to the media, the different police forces, because as I mentioned, we've not got one police force involved in this murder investigation. It is two because of Catherine Eddowes' murder in Mitre Square. So, the media. Now, we've all had an experience of the media, particularly over half term. The media were at their finest. I don't know if you know, but Dominic Cummings, one of the chief advisors for the government, broke a lot of lockdown rules by going to visit his parents. And that then meant that the media went in. And that is not a new concept. The media going in on someone or going in an investigation, really getting into it, is not a new phenomenon. This was, I think, really the first major case that the media were in. They wanted to know everything about it. They were there. Now, the newspapers did not like the police, and they made that known. So let's go with what I've got so far. So yeah, they used to present cartoons. They'd have little testimonies, all sorts, how rubbish the police were and how badly they were handling the investigation. You name it, they talked about it. They also had something called sensationalist stories. So the press would publish unofficial sketches of the suspect. And they would make them look very foreign looking, or so they would either look like an Eastern European immigrant or an Irish immigrant, but often they went for the Jewish Eastern European immigrants. So we know that tension was pretty high in terms of immigration in Whitechapel. The newspapers then made this worse with the Jack the Ripper case. Also with the sensational stories, because a lot of people in Whitechapel were uneducated and they were poor and they couldn't read, they used to get something called a penny dreadful. Now, a penny dreadful is an illustrated newspaper with very, very sensationalized pictures, very over the top, over dramatic, almost like a comic. And they would make up their own version of the event, what would happen, and they were gruesome and they just made fear hype up. Now, these stories did one thing and one thing only. They encouraged hoax letters. The most famous hoax letter was called Dear Boss, and in that it is signed by Jack the Ripper. It was known to be a fake. Apparently a journalist wrote it, but the Dear Boss letter basically said that he'd enjoyed cutting people up, and it just wasted police time because it had such a credible kind of tone to the letter. The police had to investigate it and found out it had come from a journalist. Similarly, there was another one that was delivered to a guy called George Lusk, and we talked about the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. No, we haven't. We'll talk about that in a minute. They sent him a letter called From Hell, and along with a kidney. And again, wasted police time. Then, another thing about the investigation is, like I said, the cooperation with other police forces. How do you spell that? I always get it wrong. Let's pull this up for you. There we go. So, the cooperation with other police forces. So, as I said, 4 out of the 5 murders were completed in Metropolitan Police Area, i.e. Whitechapel, H Division. But one murder on the double event, Catherine Eddowes, was murdered in Mitre Square, which just so happened to be in City Police borders. That then meant there was a separate organisation investigating one of the murders. Now, this made things very difficult because the Met Police and the City Police were not known for their working together. They had a lot of tension, competition, even though the City Police thought they were better than the Met Police. The Met Police didn't like the attitude of the City Police, so they didn't work together very well. They tried to, in fact, sabotage each other so that one would be seen as better than the other. Now, one of the major things, because of that tension and competition, was this anti-Jewish graffiti. On the night that Stride and Eddowes were killed, anti-Jewish graffiti was found near the scene, and 2 of the city detectives recorded it as evidence. But Commissioner Sir Charles Warren of the Met Police ordered that it washed away, as he felt that it would cause an anti-Jewish riot, and that actually he asked it not to be used as evidence, which did hamper the investigation. However, it was felt like it was done at the time. It felt it was done in the correct way because they were scared of riots and what was going on. The press, though, did use that as a way to criticise the police and their investigation. Right, this is the last little bit of the lecture, and I promise I will then shut up. Okay, last little bit on the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. I'll bring you closer and then I will go. So the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee was set up by a guy called George Lusk, who was a builder from Whitechapel. He felt that the police weren't doing enough. He felt that the investigation was not going well enough, and he wanted to help people that were particularly frightened of what was going on, which was pretty much everyone. So he set up this committee to catch Jack the Ripper. Now, they were annoyed that the police had not offered a reward, so they put one up themselves. And that then meant any information that came to them had to be passed on to the police or investigated by themselves. And anything of value did go to the police, which then wasted police time because 9 times out of 10, actually 9.99999 points out of 10 were hoaxes, and this is what it encouraged: hoax information, because people just wanted the money. Desperate people needed the money. They thought it was a good chance to try and get a bit of quick cash. Lots of hoax information, including that letter that I talked about called From Hell, with the kidney being sent to George Lusk. Now, the committee also organised loud amateur night patrols of volunteers, which were really undermining the police effort of the beats, but also they then kind of ruined any chance that they would be able to catch Jack the Ripper, because they had like tap shoes or bells on. Now, if you're Jack the Ripper and you're about to murder someone and you hear some bells come in, you ain't gonna do it, are you? You're gonna be like, right, I'll wait. Whereas the police were very quiet, very stealthy, so that then if they happen to stumble onto something, they might be able to catch Jack the Ripper that way. So they really made things difficult. They thought they were helping, but they made things difficult. And these factors together really did make or be a large reason why the police never caught him. But also the murders just stop. As I said, on Thursday, you'll be able to see why, the theory of the BBC, why they think they just stopped, and the case itself. I'll just bring you closer to the board so you can see what I've written. Again, all of this is on the sheet that I've prepared for you. Oh, there it is. So that should be long enough for you to pause the video if you want it. Right, as always, can you please do a mind map, look at the videos, do the questions and send them in via Teams or email. If you need anything, I am here. I am teaching at 12, so if you contact me between like 12 and 12:30, there will be a slight delay getting back to you. Otherwise, stay safe and see you next Monday for another live lesson. Bye!